You might be wondering to yourself, what are the pros of living in northern New Jersey? Or you might be thinking, what are the cons of living in northern New Jersey? Either way, we've got you covered. In today's video, we're going to talk about the pros and cons in living in northern Jersey. Let's get into the video. Hey, if this is your first visit to the channel and you're looking to learn everything there is to know about the Midtown direct suburbs of New York City, then subscribe below and tap the notification bell so you can be the first to hear about the current market here in New Jersey and even New York. Hi, I'm Jeff Massey, your local realtor. The team and I, we get calls and texts every day from people just like you who are thinking about moving to one of New York City's amazing suburbs, and we love it. So whether you're moving in 7 days or 7 months, give us a call, shoot us a text, send us an email, or schedule a video call so we can help you make an easy, stress-free purchase in the New York City area, whether you're moving from just across the river in Manhattan or from anywhere in the United States. We'd love to help. So as I said at the beginning of the video, we're talking today about the pros of living in northern New Jersey. Now at the end, we'll also be talking about the cons of living in northern New Jersey. And coincidentally, I just received a comment on one of my other videos, which I'll link below, where I talk a lot about the reasons that you need to be, not necessarily that you wouldn't come. I think that person that made the comment kind of took it as like, these are all cons, don't move here, which is kind of the thumbnail, obviously is a little clickbaity there. But essentially what I was trying to get across in that video was there are a lot of costs that people just assume, oh, the suburbs are cheaper, but there's actually a lot of costs when you think about like things like maintenance and this and that. So that video was really intended for people who are making a transition from the city and looking to move to the suburbs, and they're just trying to weigh what their immediate budgetary needs might be. So that was really focused on budget. I think in today's video, hopefully what we'll get across is some of the positives that you gain from moving to the suburbs. Now, that would be the pros, obviously, in terms of northern New Jersey specifically. In terms of the cons, we're gonna go through some of the cons, and a lot of those, in my opinion, they kind of depend on your perspective. Like, for instance, we'll get into this later, but if you're moving from Manhattan to the northern New Jersey, it's going to be different than if you're moving from Texas to northern New Jersey. And again, it'll depend on some of those topics that we're getting into. So let's talk about the pros of living in northern New Jersey. So here we go. Of course, the first one, let's talk about kind of the elephant in the room right behind me, natural beauty. So I'm here in Watchung Reservation. This reservation takes sort of mostly in mountainside New Jersey. It spans the border of Summit, New Jersey. It also goes into some of Berkeley Heights, and it's a 2,000 acre preserve. So just an example, that's kind of why I wanted to start the video here, an example of the beauty. Now, people say don't judge a book by its cover. If you've ever driven down 95, you've probably seen, the ugly smokestacks and this and that. Like I said, don't judge a book by its cover. If you peel back the cover and go a couple miles inwards, you're gonna find a beautiful place. And someone that grew up in Connecticut, you've heard all the stereotypes about New Jersey. And really, I think once you come here and really appreciate what it has to offer, you realize that all of those things are definitely just stereotypes, they're not true. But for instance, you have places like Eagle Rock Reservation, South Mountain Reservation, Grape Swamp National Park. And then you have, of course, the scenic overlooks that look over New York City. I think it's kind of funny when you're in New York City, it's all about this prime property being in New York City. But the reality is you're looking at New Jersey. Yeah, Jersey City skyline and Hoboken skylines are nice, but it's kind of prettier to be looking back at New York City and seeing Midtown Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, and those types of beautiful skyscrapers. So you do get that element, places like Weehawken, Hoboken, Jersey City, you get that view back to the city. And then as you're driving north in the Palisades, you get beautiful views across the Hudson. But in general, northern New Jersey has lots of amazing amenities in terms of natural beauty. The other place I was gonna talk about is the Delaware Water Gap. That's all the way over in the western edge by Pennsylvania. Beautiful natural, I think it's a national park or it's a national reserve, I'm not sure the specifics, but that area has lots of great trails. And again, going back to Watchung Reservation, you have trails, hiking, biking, lots of things to do to get out of the city. Now, Central Park's beautiful, but it is a small area. So in these areas, you have plenty of things to do. And here we got some motorcycles behind me as well, driving through some of the curving roads here in the Watchung Reservation. Also beaches, depending on where you are in North Jersey, you can hop on the Garden State Parkway, get down to the Jersey Shore. There's lots of different beaches there. Some of them have boardwalks, some of them are more natural. For instance, Sandy Hook is one of the closest beaches to New York City in terms of New Jersey, and from where I am in Summit, you're about an hour's drive from there. If you were in New York City, it would take you probably 2 hours to get over there, and equally to get over to like nicer beaches in Long Island, it would probably take you that much time anyway. So you do have different options, depending on where you're looking to go. Sandy Hook's just an interesting one because you get to look back at the city, but you can go to places like Asbury Park and different towns like that have beautiful beaches. So lots of things in terms of natural beauty. So I'm not going in any particular order here, but the number 2 thing I'm going to talk about is good schools. Now, New Jersey was actually ranked number 1 by US News and World Report in terms of its school quality, and that's for the entire United States. I think Connecticut's very high, Massachusetts is very high, basically the Northeast doing very well. But anyways, New Jersey was number 1. I think that's really exciting for New Jersey. And it's interesting because we'll talk about later property taxes and all these kinds of things that in terms of the cons. But I was listening to a podcast and they had one of the representatives on from New Jersey, and they're saying, actually, you see a lot of companies leaving because of taxes. They leave New Jersey. But the truth of the matter is they go other places and they don't always find the best quality of workers in terms of being able to attract those people because they want to have good schools. And a lot of these other states that are lower ranked, their school systems might not be as good. So what happens is a lot of those companies end up coming back to New Jersey. They settle down here again. And that's because a lot of their employees like to have a really good school system. So that's something positive to have in your backyard. So the other thing in your backyard in terms of northern New Jersey is cultural diversity. And this is really sort of a sensitive topic. In reality, I think it's a great positive. You have a lot of different cultures, traditions here going on, lifestyles that you don't see in other parts of the country. So it's really beautiful to see all these things coming together and being able to experience them just being a few miles down the road in terms of like, depending on where you are, you can go to different restaurants, different types of food, cuisine, different cultural events, and we're going to get into later, proximity to New York City, you do have ability to go experience a lot of those other events that happen in New York City. But I think New Jersey, Queens, parts of New York, some of the most diverse places in the world. And so that's a really good plus in terms of experiencing and learning from all those things. The next one I have on my list is job options. I had to shorten it so it would fit on the card, but really job opportunities was the category that I was looking for. And northern New Jersey is really well known for its healthcare sector, its pharmaceutical sector, its finance sector, technology, and obviously all that kind of melds when you look at New York City. And the next one's going to be proximity to New York City. So we're kind of bordering on these 2 topics, but in terms of the ability to get really high paying jobs, that's one of the other things is you've got a really high per capita income in this area, and that has to do with the availability of these amazing jobs. I had speaking into another comment, someone was saying, well, this particular video was South Orange, New Jersey, and they said, well, this is a suburb of Newark. And the reason why I called the channel the suburbs of New York City is really because a lot of this job opportunity that I'm talking about, they stem from the proximity to New York City in terms of commuting. That's, again, we're kind of starting to get into the next topic, but that economic prosperity that comes from being attached to New York City has to do with being the suburbs of New York City, being the Newark and New York City metropolitan area. That includes Jersey City, Newark, and it actually extends into counties in Pennsylvania. A lot of people don't realize that. Obviously, Long Island, Westchester, and Connecticut, Fairfield County. Some people even, depending on which thing you're reading, even include New Haven County. So it's really interesting when you're getting into the metropolitan area. So I would have loved to have called the channel Living in Metropolitan New York City or Metro Living New York City, but I think Suburbs of New York City worked out to be a really good name. And that's why this area of New Jersey is really a suburb of New York City because of those job opportunities. Because some people might be commuting locally, but to be honest, let's face it, those headquarters are in this area because they have access to those great employees that they can attract to their companies. Let's get into the next one, which I keep touching on. Obviously, proximity to New York City is a big one. And I mean, I kind of highlighted all of that in terms of like the job opportunities and all those big things. Cultural diversity, you get to go experience events that are in the city as well as New Jersey. And then in terms of commuting, we've got other videos on the channel that you should definitely watch. Some of the best commutes to New York City are actually in New Jersey. The Morristown line can get you Midtown Direct into the city in some places as little as 32 minutes, like Maplewood, Short Hills, South Orange. Definitely, I'll link that below. You should check out that video if you haven't seen it already, because it does talk about some of the conveniences of those cities. But commute times is obviously a really big one. You do have bus options as well. The other thing you have in terms of proximity is the airports. I feel like in New Jersey, getting to Newark when you're living in New Jersey, it's very quick. I live in Summit. I can get to the Newark airport in about 15 minutes. If you're in the city, you're really, you have JFK, you have LaGuardia, but depending on where you live, it could take you an hour by car to get to some of those places. So I think the convenience factor of being in New Jersey is really nice, but having the proximity to the city is great. Obviously, you have the ability to run over to New York and take the train, run over, drive over, whatever you're gonna do, and see some of the amazing museums and cultural institutions there. But then you have your own things like beautiful nature here and that kind of stuff. So proximity is amazing because of job opportunities, because of cultural items, because of great commute times associated with those job opportunities. And again, check out that video because there's some really amazing options in less than an hour to Penn Station. So, okay, let's get into the cons of living in northern New Jersey. And now again, this is where I was getting into the point about perspective. So if you're coming from Manhattan, a lot of these cons you're already kind of used to. And I know a lot of these seem like kind of obvious things, but we're going to get into it. So first con that I'm going to talk about is cost of living. So again, cost of living is a tricky one because we're already in the Northeast. We're in that New York City metropolitan area. It's going to be a very expensive area. And interestingly, I was looking up sort of the indexes for this area, and New York City is 100. That's the entire city as an average. That's the 100 baseline. And some of these interesting points here, I'm going to touch on some of the specific towns just to give you some context. But cost of living, I think it really depends on certain lifestyle choices. Obviously budgeting in terms of like, are you buying at Whole Foods versus ShopRite? These kind of things are going to have a big impact on your cost of living. Most importantly is probably your location. So if you're buying in very expensive locations, that's going to have a huge impact on your cost of living because the cost of housing is much higher in those locations. So as a baseline, 100% for all of New York City, 100. To give you sort of a segmented piece, and again, looking at specific pieces of New York City, Upper West Side, you're at a 212. So that's double the overall average of New York City. Park Slope, for example, 186. So just to give you some context when we're comparing to New York, because that's probably what a lot of people are coming from Manhattan or parts of New York thinking about moving. So what's the cost of living? Well, in Summit where I live, you're at a 123. So you're higher than most of New York City, but you're much lower than like Upper West Side or Park Slope, for instance. Short Hills, you're at 217. So again, that's double. So you're kind of like the Upper West Side. Jersey City, though, just across the river, you have a lot more apartments. Maybe there's more options for cost of living. That's at an 83 percentile. And then a place like Maplewood, where you've got that amazing commute, 32 minutes, I keep saying, that one's at 113 index. So there's a lot of, spectrum there, and it all depends on the housing price is one of the biggest factors. So keep that in mind. But in general, cost of living, when we look at the macro, yeah, if you're moving from Texas, if you're moving from Tennessee, if you're moving from Colorado, those places are going to have a much less cost of living, of course. But I think, again, it all depends on your perspective. So if you're coming from New York City, it's probably going to be about the same. If you are coming from far away, it's probably for a reason, and it's probably that second option I told you, which is job opportunities. So you're coming here for a reason, and they're going to pay you a lot more money. So that should hopefully even out with your cost of living and taking that into account. So the next one kind of attached to that is property taxes. Of course, again, that, we are in a very high property tax area. I think Westchester, to be honest, is going to be pretty high as well. I think Fairfield County is actually pretty low. So it all depends on where you're looking. But the big offset with that, which a lot of people don't realize if they're coming from Manhattan, is that if they're living in the city, they're paying New York City income tax. Now, I'm not an accountant. You're gonna have to check with your accountant on all of this stuff, but depending on what your pay is, between 3 and 4%, it's graduated progressive tax is going to be going into income tax to New York City. So yes, you might be paying higher property taxes in the suburbs, but you're not going to be paying those New York City income taxes. So in some cases it should balance out. In other cases you might actually have to pay more, and in other cases you might actually save money because maybe you're a really high income earner. You might be paying a lot of money to the city of New York, and those property taxes that you're paying, depending on which type of property you're purchasing, they might balance out, but it all depends. So the next one in terms of cons is crowded. Again, matter of perspective here. If you're coming from Manhattan, one of the most dense places in the world, versus northern New Jersey, where, okay, yeah, you might have to buy a house that is only 1/4 of an acre or less than that. 1/4 of an acre is pretty big compared to a 1,200 square foot 3-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side. So it all depends on your matter of perspective there. In terms of crowding, I mean, yeah, like you get the benefit of all these things that we're talking about in terms of, you know, having access to the city with good jobs and all these different things. So crowding, you're probably already used to it if you're coming from New York City and you're just looking to get more space, a bigger house in the suburbs. Now, of course, if you're coming from Texas or, you know, the Midwest, then obviously it's going to be different from you. You're going to have to adjust to that, and, you know, it is what it is. But again, you're probably coming here most likely because of jobs and those opportunities that those are going to bring you. The next one I've got on my list kind of goes hand in hand. Traffic. So of course, traffic, if you're moving to northern New Jersey, you probably do need a car. And you could live in some towns, I mentioned this in other videos, you could potentially live without a car. Like where I live in Summit, I'm walking distance to the train. You could get by with ordering Amazon groceries and Whole Food groceries, that kind of thing. But the reality is you probably do need a car to get around and enjoy different things like watch on reservation. Or you could just take Ubers, obviously, but that can get expensive. Again, that goes into some of the things you need to take into account if you're moving to the suburbs, all these additional costs like car insurance, car payments, this kind of stuff. Take all that into account when you're moving to the city. So I'm getting to my last con, and the last point of the video is the weather. So the weather, in this case, we're talking really about cold weather, because the summers, they do get hot, but it's bearable, and we do have air conditioning most places here, obviously. So it can get pretty cold in the winter. We had a couple days this winter where it was, you know, 20 feels like -5, you know, but those are few and far between. And I think as time is kind of progressing on us, the average temperatures, as we know, have been going up a little bit. So for instance, last winter we had a lot of snow, many big snowstorms, and it cost a lot of money in terms of shoveling that out. This year I think we had 1 or 2, and they really went by really quick in terms of, like, they didn't last very long. There wasn't a lot of snow to shovel, and, you know, salting wasn't as bad this winter. Now those are 2 anecdotal years. Next year could be totally different, but I think if you're looking at the sort of long-term averages, I think those are sort of changing and the cold weather's sort of going away. But again, it's, you know, it's a couple months and then you get to enjoy the beautiful weather in the spring. Now, as you can see, it's spring here right now. You can see some of the buds popping around me, but you know, it's mid-April and we're already at 86 degrees. So the heat is kind of coming into play a little bit. To kind of talk about the flip side of things, the heat is coming up, and in the summer it can get very hot, almost 100 degrees, 90, you know, and the humidity is very saturated. So it can get sort of unbearing in terms of heat. But we tend to, most people are pretty used to that and we can kind of deal with that. I think it's the cold that kind of scares off most people, snow, that kind of thing. But again, kind of going with that trend of temperatures warming, the summers could get pretty hot here. I think I saw a video from PBS, I can't remember who put it out. They were trying to analyze, like, in the future, what would be the best location for global warming, like safety in terms of temperature and everything. And they said there was like this one county in Vermont. Unless you're prepared to go up into the woods of Vermont, New Jersey is probably a pretty safe bet in terms of good weather. That cold might go away long term. But anyways, I'm forecasting here. I don't want to get into the politics of all that or the science of it, but in general, you do have some cold days. You know, yes, there can be snow. I think the snow is beautiful, especially if you come to a place like this when that first 6 inches and we haven't seen the plow yet. It's just gorgeous when you see all the snow and the trees and so on. A couple days later, it gets a little ugly when you start to see all the sand and everything. But I think the weather in general, it's a day like today, it makes it all worth it because you're starting to enjoy, you know, no jacket on today, middle of April, and it's just beautiful. So I hope that was helpful to you. I'm gonna link a lot of videos down below that reference other videos that I've made talking about commutes, talking about different things to take into account when you're analyzing your budget for the suburbs. Also, if you're looking to learn more about the buying process, I have some videos on those. You should definitely check those out to understand the difference between New York and New Jersey. And in general, I really hope this content's helpful to you. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below or feel free to reach out to me directly. As always, I love to hear from you and set up those video calls so I can learn more about what you're looking to do in your real estate search. So thanks again for letting me into your home, and I hope that together we can help you find your next one. In the meantime, we'll see you in the next video.